Good afternoon and welcome to the officials of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation. My name is Bridget Anisette George, and I'm the chairman of the Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations, PAAC, has the mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditures embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct an examination into the management and operations of the Housing Development Corporation, HDC, including restructuring of HDC into 3 distinct state enterprises. The role of the committee is to assist the stakeholders in achieving the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditures embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval, to determine the challenges being faced and possible solutions to these challenges, and make recommendations for improvement of public administration. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, on Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and Twitter @ttparliament. Participants are advised that their microphones should remain muted until recognized by the chair. I now will invite the members of the committee who are present to introduce themselves. We can start with Member Mark. Member Mark, your mic. You're still muted, Member Mark. Okay, so Member Mark may be having, okay, right.
Okay now. Yes, Member Wade Mark.
Jeremy Campbell.
Yes, Vice Chair, you can go ahead.
Hello, Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman. Welcome to members of the team.
Good afternoon, everyone. Member Deonarai.
Good afternoon. I am Randall Mitchell, member.
Good afternoon, Lisa Morris Julian, member.
Good afternoon, Lawrence Islop, member.
And thank you very much, members. And I'll now invite in the order the members of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to introduce themselves, and then the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Nirmala Ramlogan. I'm Acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michael Bing, Head of the Economic Research and Planning Unit at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Alvin Pascal, I'm Director of Legal Services at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Liana Gittins. I'm a legal officer too at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
And is Ms. Cummings here? Okay, so then maybe we can go on to the Housing Development Corporation. So maybe we could start with the members of your board.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Keston McQuilkin, Deputy Chairman of the Board of the Housing Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Dante Salmon Carrington, board member on the Housing Development Corporation.
Okay, so Madam CEO, maybe you can introduce yourselves and then your members of your management team.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am Jaisal McFarlane, Managing Director of the HDC.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Jeremy Campbell, Divisional Manager of Corporate Services.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Larry McDonald, Divisional Manager, Estate Management, HDC.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Corinne Trembili, Senior Manager, Internal Audit.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vaughan Rondon, Divisional Manager, Procurement and Contracts at the HDC.
Good afternoon, everyone. Vidal Ramrup Singh, Divisional Manager, Acting Project Development and Oversight at the HDC.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Mulligan, Divisional Manager, Legal, HDC.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rubel Ramara, Divisional Manager, Construction Management and Operations of HDC.
I don't believe Ms. Kanisha Lightborn is here as yet, so maybe we can make a start. And therefore, I will invite the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Housing and Development and Urban Development to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development has, as part of its mandate, the provision of government subsidized housing and the monitoring and evaluation of housing trends and markets in the country, both of which are executed through its implementation agency, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation. The Ministry and the Housing Development Corporation remain committed to improving the physical and socioeconomic conditions of citizens through public sector housing initiatives, particularly for those in the low to lower middle income groups, as articulated in National Development Strategic Plan, Vision 2030. In so doing, the ministry provides a monitoring role over the strategic direction of the corporation's operational framework in accordance with the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual. In support of the effective execution of its mandate in accordance with government's vision, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation was established by Act No. 24 of 2005 to replace the National Housing Authority. Its mandate is enshrined in Section 13(1) of the Act, which essentially deals with the provision of affordable housing units for mortgage, rent-to-own, and rental arrangements for low to lower middle income applicants whose monthly income does not exceed $25,000. One of the first pillars of the government's housing policy is affordability. As such, Cabinet has approved a housing pricing formula where the government absorbs infrastructural costs, which equate to a subsidy of on average, approximately 40% of the overall cost of the housing units constructed by the HDC. The ministry also provides funding for the rehabilitation and maintenance of HDC rental apartments and housing units under Vote D075. Over the last 3 years, the ministry has allocated approximately $20 million towards this activity. The ministry also ensures the corporation adheres to the operational guidelines as stated in the State Enterprises Performance and Monitoring Manual and the Minister of Finance Code Circular. This is to ensure that the agency implements best practices in the conduct of its operational activities, including its construction program. The ministry also provides oversight and guidance of the agency's strategic plans and objectives to ensure they are aligned to the government's National Development Strategy, Vision 2030, and are consistent with the 5 national development teams. In so doing, we monitor the activities of the HDC to ensure that it has the necessary resources for its projects and programs. In so doing, the ministry monitors the processes of the HDC through its strategic plan as outlined by the HDC for the period 2021 to 2025, annual budgets, annual financial statements, and minutes of board meetings. We also review all invoices submitted for payment to ensure transparency and accountability of procurement practices in expending government funding, as well as ensuring financial instruction, regulations, and guidelines as adhered to according to the Exchequer Audit Act, Chapter 6901. The financial and natural resources required to meet the total demand for governmental subsidized housing far exceeds the resources available to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and by extension, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Indeed, no government in the world can do that. No government in the world can build a house for every citizen who asks for one. What we can do is reorganize resources to deliver as many housing solutions as possible to as many citizens who qualify, namely the low to lower income, mainly the low to lower middle income group with greater efficiency. As such, the Minister of Finance announced a reorganization of the agency in the 2022 budget statement to facilitate the agency's role as landlord for its rental properties and as developer with respect to the construction of affordable housing units for sale to the public. The process is currently ongoing and was agreed to by Cabinet in August of this year. While the agency has provided written submissions for scrutiny ahead of this sitting, as requested by the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, it is important to note that the ministry continues to support the HDC through the provision of funding from the ministry's PSIP and Consolidated Fund, via mental transfers from HDC's quotes to assist with meeting payment schedules, review of HDC's monthly status reports against draft estimates using key performance indicators to ensure projects are within budget and on schedule, Cabinet notes regarding loan payments. With these few words, Madam Chair, I take the opportunity to reiterate the ministry's unwavering support of the work of the Housing Development Corporation as it provides mortgage and rental units to low and lower middle income families. As Acting Permanent Secretary, I can give the undertaking that the ministry's team will continue to support the agency as it fulfills the recommendations of this honorable committee. With the permission of the chair, I will now pass you over to the Managing Director of the HDC, Ms. Giselle McFarlane, who will elaborate further and take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. I now invite the Managing Director of the HDC to make her opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chair and everyone. We are delighted to be here to answer all your questions. As you know, the HDC is tasked with the provision of affordable houses for our citizens. Currently, our mandate is 2,500 houses per year, for which the HDC is working assiduously to complete. Today's session is intended to answer how our operations are run, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Managing Director. Okay, so I wanted to maybe start the conversation by asking the acting PS with respect to the monitoring role that she indicated that the ministry has. over the operations of HDC and also ensuring that the HDC is properly resourced. And in terms of looking at the submission, it appears to me that one of the major challenges that the HDC has indicated is in the area of financial. And while that may also have the aspect of their revenue generation, I gleaned also with respect to the releases, the reliability of releases, the, I don't want to say the lack of consistency, but let's say the consistency of releases. How does your ministry ensure that the allocation that has been appropriated by the Parliament is released in a timely manner for the HDC to discharge its function?
Madam Chair, we review the expenditure reports of the HDC, and we look at their implementation schedules also. And when bills are received from the HDC, we do a comprehensive audit of them, and they are then sent on to the Ministry of Finance. When they are sent to the Ministry of Finance, we also have a very good rapport with the ministry to make sure that they are facilitating for the payments.
Okay, so could you give me an idea of the timeline, I wouldn't say the time gap, between a request for releases and the actual release to HDC? Roughly, what kind of timeline operates?
According to the amount of bills that we would get, is how we would be working. So requests can take a matter of 3 days, or it can be up to a week to fulfill.
So could you give me a recent example of when it took 3 days? So you're saying 3 days as the minimum, and you're saying 7 days as the maximum. So could you give me, because you say it's based on quantum required. Give me an example so we could kind of group them in a sort of category. So if they ask for $20, it will take 3 days. And if they ask for $1 million, it will take 7 days. Give us an idea of how that works.
So the most recent one we have received, and we have received payments from the HDC for, it was in the amount of about $1,500,000. And we would have received payments for that within 3 days. At present, we have a payment which is processing, which is taking us a little over a week to have processed.
So I can only. When was the date of the request?
It was last week, Friday. Right, so I can only report for this financial year at present. If the committee would like reports for past, I would have to furnish that to you at a later date.
Okay, so thank you. So that from your end, it will be that therefore the major financial constraint will not be with respect to the subvention, but with respect to HDC's collections. Would that be correct to say?
Processing of bills.
I'm confused.
Okay. Could you elaborate a little more in terms of what you mean by, please?
No, I asked you about releases, requests and releases. If I understand well what you've said to me, there isn't any problem. There isn't any time gap. There's a minimum of 3 days and a maximum of 7 days. The last request you told me was last week, Friday, so we're not even a week. Even though it says taking more than a week, we're not even a week past. So if that is the track record of requests versus actual receipt of the subvention, and HDC, from what I gleaned from their submission, one of their major challenges would be financial. I'm asking you if I'm correct then in concluding that that issue financial would not have anything to do with tardiness or lack of responsiveness in the release of the subvention, but really in terms of the HDCN, which is their collections, which has nothing to do with the ministry.
It does not have to do with the ministry in terms of tardiness or release of the subvention.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I want to ask maybe the HDC. I see your mandate as set out in section 13 of your act, which seems to me very wide. And I want to ask that, is there anything else that you do which is necessary and convenient for and in connection with the provision of affordable shelter and associated community facilities for low and middle income persons? If there's anything else you do other than construction of units and for mortgage, sale, and rental. Is there anything else that you do that falls under those wide parameters?
So yes, Chair, I can take that question. Good afternoon, everyone again.
Good afternoon.
So the HDC also maintain rental properties, and in some instances, the HDC covers for those who are unable to cover their electrical and water bills. The HDC covers those as well. So it's generally centers around the maintenance of the properties, which would be such items as the lifts, the grass cutting, drain cleaning, and those items, as well as in some instances covering electricity bills for some of our tenants.
Okay, so thanks so much, Ms. McFarlane. I really find interesting about the electricity bills because I didn't realize that that came out of HDC. If you could let us know a little bit more about that. How do people qualify? What kind of quantum? How long that sort of support is given? And this will only be in respect of your tenants. Would I be correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. So they are mainly for the traditional rentals, and those rentals are in the location of generally in Port of Spain, where we have tenants who their payments are around $100 or so, and for our pensioners' quarters.
Okay, so annually, roughly, what sort of sum we're talking about?
The sum for the electricity bills could run in the vicinity of annually around well, our electricity bill annually is around $30,000, and on an average for those tenants, it will be around 10,000.
Okay, so I'll give you an opportunity to check that, so you can give us that in writing, and
yes,
your eligibility, for such sort of support. And is it a continuing support, or is it for 3 months, 6 months? If you could give us some details with respect to that.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's okay.
Yes.
Well, we are currently reviewing this entire exercise in an effort to, for some instances, to remove this provision by the HDC.
Okay, so what I wanted to ask is and maybe you could put that in the submission, what caused the need for the review, what were the challenges, and what you're expecting to address by this new system you intend to put in place. Okay, what is the devil or the mischief you're trying to address with this new structure? Member Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Piggybacking on your first question, I know that there are two programs that the HDC is presently involved in. The Housing Construction Incentive Program. That, I mean, and listening to the DPS when she made the statement that government cannot reasonably be expected to provide housing for all its citizens. I know that there is an incentive program incentivizing the private sector to build low-cost housing. So I needed an update on that program, how well it is doing, how many participants, and also the PPP program.
Sure, Chairman and members, I'll transfer this question over to Vidal, who is our Divisional Manager of Planning Project, Divisional Manager of Project Oversight. He would answer this question.
All right, good day again, everyone. So I will answer the question in the Housing Construction Incentive Program. So a total of 134 packages were sold, resulting in 38 packages deposited and 38 contractors registering under the HCIP. Of these 38 contractors who registered, we have 2 contractors who were retained to execute work on state land and 1 contractor who is executing works on private land. In total, the total number of units under the HCIP thus far is 55 units in total. And that's for the HCIP.
Member Mitchell, your mic?
I'm sorry, yes, this program started in 2017. We have 55 under. Can you give us an update? Are you advertising the program? Or is it that you are advertising the program and you are just not getting the type of responses from the private sector?
Okay, so the program has been advertised on the HDC's website. But what we find is that we have not been getting the interest from contractors thus far since the program was launched.
Okay, and could you just tell us about the PPP program, how that works and what it's yielding?
Chair and members, I would like to pass this question over to our Divisional Manager of Construction, Mr. Ramil Ramara.
Good afternoon, everyone again. So the PPP partnership is really our design, build, finance program. Design, build, finance, because we would engage a contractor to design, construct, and finance the project during the construction phase. After the construction phase, the contractor could very well hand over units to us in sections, or they could hand over units in terms of a whole of the entire site. Only at the end of construction, where units are habitable, then the contractor would be paid. The contractor would be paid through the remittances in terms of the conversion of the house through a mortgage with the mortgagee. And that is the first option. The second is if that doesn't happen within a 2 months period, the HDC would actually pay the contractor and receive the remittances from the mortgage process. So that is really the model. In terms of projects that we would have undertaken under the design, build, finance approach, would have been 20 packages or 20 contracts. And this have a total yield of 945 units. To date, out of the 945 units, we would have completed and handed over in terms of delivery, 354 units, 52 units, sorry. And under construction right now is 542 units. These contracts vary from Mahogany Court, Malabar Site 1, Riverside Dot in South, Riverside East San Fernando, Riverside C in San Fernando, Terrestrial in Darby, and Eden Gardens in Freeport.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Mark? Member Mark, your mic.
Yes, Madam Chair, you hear me?
Yes, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, just to follow up on what you had asked very early in this particular, in the proceedings, I just wanted to ask the managing director of HDC if she could share with us how many apartments are covered or enjoy the facility that you made reference to earlier, that is the cover or coverage of water and electricity rates or payments by the HDC on behalf of the tenants. How many apartments are involved in this particular facility, Madam Chair? Through you.
Okay, good afternoon again, Madam Chair and Member Mark. So our rental units amounts to over 12,000 units, of which 5,454 units are traditional rentals. These traditional rentals are they were built since they are in areas such as Duncan Street, Nelson Street, Beetham, yeah, let's see. 1 second, if I could read this document a lot better.
If you will, through Madam Chair, you can provide us that in writing when you go through.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask you, 5,400 traditional renters.
Correct.
Are these the ones that enjoy the electricity and water rates arrangement?
Yes.
Okay. And that is the one you talked about. Anyway, you're going to provide us with the correct figures. When I say the correct figures, you did indicate that it was about 10,000. And I'm trying to reconcile that with the 5,400 as you have just indicated. But I guess we'll put it in writing for the committee. So we don't have to pursue that at this time. What I wanted to ask, Madam Chair, through you to the Managing Director, is how much monies are owed by these renters as we speak
to
the HDC?
Sure.
So we're just talking, just 1 minute, Member Mark, we're just talking about the traditional rentals. Yes.
Okay. Joint coverage.
Okay. So as of today's date, our recoveries figure is, 1 second. Our delinquency figure is in the vicinity of, for the traditional rentals, it's in the vicinity of $47 million. So we have broken out our portfolio, delinquency portfolio into traditional rentals, license to occupy, rent to own, and commercial delinquency. And for the traditional rentals, it's $47 million as at today's date.
All right. Can you tell this committee, based on your submission, the Housing Development Corporation in 2020 received $602.6 million. In 2021, the HDC received $642.7 million. In 2022, $384 million. However, the allocations for those years were utilized for recurrent expenditure, primarily for loans and bond repayments, which were incurred sometime in 2006. Could you tell this committee or explain to this committee the following? Why funds allocated for those years that I've mentioned still being used for loans and bond repayments or bond payments arising out of an arrangement in 2006. That's the first area I'd like you to clear for this committee. The second one is, can you tell us
So,
what—
Member Mark, maybe you could give the Managing Director an opportunity to answer that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And then you'll ask the other question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Member Mark, the loans and bonds have a period of a term which would be beyond from the date of the borrowings to the expired time, and therefore the remittances would be to satisfy those term arrangements.
And can you tell this committee what is the expiration of these loans and the bond arrangements? What is the expiration time frame?
Well, there are various mix of loans and bonds, and so I would have to provide that in writing.
Okay. So can you tell us also what is the current status and nature of these loans?
The status of the loans are there still to be paid off, and the nature of the loans would have been to provide funds for the HDC's operations.
Can you tell us what is the total value of for these loans and the bond payments? What's the total value?
I would have to provide that in writing.
Okay. Who are these loans? Who are these loans? Who are these for these loans and payment owed to? Or let me rephrase it.
Okay, so Member Mark,
which agency?
Member Mark, might I suggest, as regards those loans,
yes,
that the Managing Director be given an opportunity to provide us in writing all the details surrounding the loans in terms of quantum, date of loan, the term of the loan, purpose of the loan, actual status, if the payments, I understand you to be asking from status, if the payments are up to date in servicing the loan and that sort of thing. I think in all fairness, maybe we should give the Managing Director an opportunity to give us that in writing. It'll be a more comprehensive response.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Chair, I have a question I'd like to ask on the accountability front. Madam Chair, we are all aware that the Minister of Finance in his 2022-23 budget statement did indicate that he was allocating some $500 million out of a total of $1.5 billion to the HDC and to deal with payment of outstanding amounts to contractors. Can the Managing Director inform this committee what is the quantum of monies that are owed and outstanding to contractors as it relates to work that would have been concluded and properly certified, Madam Chair?
Sure. Chair and Member Mark, the amount of the balance of our outstanding liabilities to contractors includes our actual bills and an accrual. To date, it sits at 1.3 billion, of which we are making progress payments from the 500 million that was approved and received by the HDC. So we are in the process of paying, and therefore there would be little movement because only one payment from the first tranche has been made to date. And as PS mentioned, they are reviewing our second submission.
And could you tell this committee or inform this committee how much monies, or not monies, but can you tell us, for instance, what is the number or the amount of matters currently before the courts in relation to outstanding bills owed to contractors?
Can I defer that question to our divisional manager of legal? If she has the figures before her, she would provide it to the committee.
Good afternoon, members. At this moment, there are 8 claims that were instituted by contractors for breach of contract, monies due and owing. A rough estimate of the total sum would be $339 million.
Okay. And Madam Chair, the final point I'd like to raise at this, in this round, I should say, has to do with the database of the HDC. And maybe the managing director can tell us what is the current database as it relates to the number of applicants. That's one, part one. And two, given the salary structure in this country, where we know a vast, almost about 70% of the population receive less than $7,000 or thereabouts a month in salary, and given the value that they have to pay for apartments or houses built by the HDC, which could range between 1.5 million to even as high as $2 or $3 million. Tell us, for instance, one, the number of applicants in your database, and how is the HDC addressing this dichotomous situation in terms of the value of properties being constructed by the HDC vis-a-vis the actual income, salaries, and wages received by workers, whether they be in the middle class, the lower middle classes, or the working class. Can you explain that to us?
Member Mark. So we'd have Jeremy Campbell, our divisional manager of corporate services, take you through our current database and its allocation. And Romel Ramarak will take you through the construction side of it. Jeremy, over to you.
Good day, panel. Thank you for the question. So our allocation policy is based on the cabinet note that governs allocation, which is September 25th, 2008. That policy clearly states that allocation is based on a 60% random selection draw, 25% ministerial, 5% elderly and disabled, and 10% for the Joint Protective Services. Now, based on the database, as of October 12, 2022, there's 195,804 customers on the database. This database is managed by the Ministry of Housing. What the agency tries to do is to assess persons and place them into units based on availability and price and the prices that are currently being afforded to the customers for certain areas. What needs to be understood by the panel is that based on customers' age and their income, this will determine what and where they qualify for. Also, the preferences of customers. So, for example, a customer may have applied for a single-family unit 10 years ago, but their income would have changed. They may have gotten older, so now they may not have qualified for that unit. Also, at the point in time, they may have applied for an apartment, but now they may have got married, have more kids. They may want a single-family unit. And if the agency doesn't have those units available, that is where as Member Mark would have explained, that's where things gets a bit tricky. But we are guided by the cabinet note, and everything is based on availability and the assessment of the customers. I will pass it over to Mr. Ramarak on the construction side.
Good afternoon again, everyone. So regarding the construction, in terms of the bands that Mr. Campbell would have raised just a moment ago, we construct in accordance to the bands that we would have received from the HAPS database. And these bands in terms of construction would be among several programs. So there are 4 main categories that we bill to. So to firstly would be units in the vicinity of $250,000. This would cover under the small and medium contractors initiative. And this would be for the lower tier of the small and medium contractors initiative. The second band would be for affordable houses or affordable homes, which is really a value between $350,000 to $500,000. This will straddle between the small and medium contractors and the accelerated housing program. The third category would be in middle income homes between $650,000 to $900,000. This would be the majority of these homes would be done through our accelerated housing program. And the last category of homes is really targeting for the young professionals, which would be between 900 to about 1.2 million. this would broadly be covered by our design build finance program. And that is how we cover the different range of salary brackets within the HAPS database and through the execution of these houses through these different programs.
Madam Chair, if you may allow me, what's your name, sir?
Romel Ramarak.
Yeah, Romel Ramarak, I just wanted to ask you, given the inflationary cycle and challenges that we are faced with, given the high cost of imported materials, steel among other things, those bans that you have just identified, would it mean that, for instance, the government would have to heavily subsidize? Because you would agree with me, or I should put it another way, from the information I have, and you can correct me, it seems to me that the cost of construction of final units by the HDC seem to be in the $1 million range, and you started off with a 250,000 and it ended up at about a 1.5 million. So I wanted to ask you, to what extent we, the taxpayers, through the government, have to heavily subsidize contractors, HDC, in an effort to ensure that those prices that you have outlined can be accessible to those categories that you have identified.
Okay, so Mr. Mark,
Yes,
quite frankly, I feel that that question should either be directed to the PS,
okay,
or the chairman or the general manager, and not the divisional manager, construction management.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm directing you, and you can direct.
So I don't know, maybe both the PS, and I don't know if the chairman is here as yet, or the managing director. Each of you all can have a turn with respect to that response.
Yeah. Chair, I can go first. So the HDC's board has approved a pricing policy. It's a strategic measure of the board to one, keep the prices down and in line with subsidies that is affordable or can be afforded by the government. The policy broadly outlines how the price of the units, and the price of the units will be at the lower of the cost, the value of the unit, and with a maximum subsidy of 25%. This is a decision that was approved by the board and is before cabinet for approval. So in other words...
So let me just ask something, because one, and the PS made the point that the subsidy is a 40-60.
Correct.
Right? 40% is the subsidy, 60% is the, well, I guess what the costs must cover, the purchase price must cover. This is only with respect to purchases. This is not with respect to rentals.
Correct.
Okay, yes.
Yes, and for the rentals as well, what the HDC has started doing, for every unit that is constructed, we obtain valuation reports from an independent valuator, and that report indicates what should be the rental value and what is the market value. And the HDC has determined that the subsidized amount should be no more than 25% of the unit rental or cost going forward. So we are looking at reducing the subsidies that are usually provided by the government to the HDC going forward.
Okay, so the question Member Mark is really asking is, how does that impact on your mandate to provide affordable shelter and associated facilities for low and middle income persons?
Right. So we are still building within the band, which is the band at which our customers qualify for. However, we are ensuring at the same time that the difference between the cost of the units and the price that we sell at, there is no more than a 25% price reduction or subsidy by the government.
Okay, so maybe I could just ask another way. How do you define low and middle income persons? Because I thought that $25,000 is what defined that catchment, but I don't seem to get that impression from what you're saying with respect to your pricing policy.
Right. So the 25,000 is the low to middle income price range. However, your what you qualify for depends on a variety of issues. You can qualify for over 1.5 based on your age and based on your number of dependents. So the age allows you to qualify for more because you have a longer period of repayment, and therefore that satisfies that criteria. However, we are ensuring that the cost of the units that we sell has no more than a 25% subsidy for whomever qualifies for that particular unit.
And PS, I think it's your turn.
Chair, we would have to defer and ask please to submit a written response, please.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. I was seeing a hand raised by Mr. Garcia. I don't know if that was an error or if he wished to make an intervention here.
Madam Chair, not at this point. I think it was an error. I am observing and listening, and when the time comes, I will intervene.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garcia. Member Mitchell, I believe your hand is raised to make an intervention.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify something. Now, I know the DPS spoke about a 60-40 split, but the cabinet approved pricing policy was such where the government would absorb the cost of the land and the cost of the infrastructure, and the consumer, the applicant, would pay the cost of the construction. The 60-40 split is really a talk of averages, where it averaged government absorbing, I believe it was 60% of the cost of the land infrastructure, as well as the cost of the construction of the house. So if I am to just refine Senator Mark's question, having regard to the inflationary pressures now being experienced, is it the HDC's position that they are now going to seek to reformulate the pricing policy through cabinet, or they are going to seek ways to reduce the cost of the construction of the units?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Garcia, you want to make an intervention now?
Yes, Madam Chair. It is the intention of the board to approach the minister to take a note to cabinet in respect of the pricing policy. The second part of it is that the agency is seeking ways to bring down the cost of construction. And we are in active discussion both with our internal construction department and contractors to reduce the level of finishes and really to go back to the old days where we provided a very basic house, which allowed people, as time go on, as in Diamond Vale and a number of other housing developments, to outfit the house in the manner that they wish. That would reduce costs significantly. So, in summary, we are going to reduce the cost of construction, but that will not address it in its totality. And we will be approaching cabinet to come up with a new pricing policy.
Okay, so Mr. Garcia, all this new pricing policy we're hearing about is not implemented as yet. That is for the future.
Yes, Madam Chair, we cannot unilaterally implement a policy without the approval of cabinet. There are existing cabinet approved policies, and therefore what would be required is for the cabinet to agree to rescind the original decision and to replace it with the new pricing formula and strategy.
Okay, so currently what exists is the 40-60 split. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, but as Senator Mark was pointing out, inflationary pressures and a number of other issues such as COVID, the supply chain logistics, have all contributed to an upward trend in prices that has distorted 60-40 split. And that is why we are seeking to approach the cabinet with a new pricing policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Now call on Member Dion-Ryan to make her intervention at this stage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for your responses thus far. I just want to follow up on one of the questions asked with respect to the age payables, the amount of monies owed to contractors. Now, in your written submission on page 124, it was noted that as of 30th of April, the balance on the age payables, which is the amount owed to contractors over 90 days, is $1.018 billion. Now, my question is, what is the HDC's strategy to resolve or to settle these debts? And I ask this in the context of being very much aware that a $500 million loan would be going towards financing part of this age payables. There is a balance. So how is the balance going to be treated with? When I receive the answer, then I'll ask the other question.
I would like to respond to that, Senator. Senator Mark referred to the Minister of Finance's budget statement, where he said 1.5 billion would be allocated to the HDC. 500 million of that is to go directly into settling outstanding debts. 500 million is to restart whole project. And if my memory serves me correct, there are just under 2,000 units in various stages of completion. One of the strategies to reduce the debt is to use that money to complete the units and then give us the ability to sell those units and increase our cash flows that will allow us to settle the outstanding debt. The third strategy is for the HDC to get its customers to honor their commitments. That is the various categories, such as the people who are renting, the people who enjoy HDC mortgages, the people who are in rent to own and license to occupy. So to sum it up, there are three mechanisms. One is a direct 500 million. Two is the sale of those stalled units. And 3 is to encourage our clients to meet their commitments. And we are confident that that would be sufficient to deal with this burden that we currently have.
So might I just ask one to Mr. Garcia? Would I be correct in saying the assumption is that that debt as it exists would be ring fenced, and there's the expectation that there's not going to be an ongoing accumulation?
That is the assumption, Chairman. And why I say that is the assumption, because I think Mr. Romel in his earlier statement was talking about the various bands of construction. Then too, we alluded on the whole question of the subsidies, where we would be billing and pricing our units closer to what we constructed them at. So that gap between what we sell and what we pay for the unit, we are going to close that gap significantly. We are moving to, as I said, we use the 3 strategies, and that, all things being equal, should allow us to satisfy our creditors.
Okay, so let me ask something. Has there been any sort of modeling of this? Because that's one part on the sales. I'm hearing that you have a big debt with rentals. Okay, so tenant A owes you $5,000. You need to collect that. But while you're collecting that, there is an ongoing rent if he's still in occupation. How does that factor into your debt management portfolio? Because what I heard your managing director tell us, that 5,000 whatever plus people owe $47 million. And if they're still in occupation, it's one thing for them to be dealing with the arrears. What happens to the current? How have you factored that in to your strategy?
Madam Chair, I would prefer that we submit that in writing, because I don't want at this time to answer off the top of my head. I want to be as accurate and to give us full answers as possible. So I would ask that we be allowed to answer that in writing.
Okay, and I just want to say one thing, Mr. Garcia, for the in writing. I think we are contemporaries. The younger people may not understand. Please don't do your submissions in red. It's not easy on aging eyes.
I understand.
Thank you very much. Member.
We comply.
May I continue?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, for that answer, and thank you for your intervention, Madam Chair. Now, I still not entirely clear in my head. I know some of the response would be submitted in writing. I understand the 3 strategies that you have identified, and hoping that all else is equal, you, Mr. Garcia, the intention is that the balance of this $1 billion after the $500 million settlement has come from the debt. The balance would be taken care of by implementing these strategies. Do you have a timeline as to how long it will take for these 3 strategies to recover the additional $500 million in debt?
If I may, I would want to suggest that within the next 12 to 14 months, we should be able to clear all of the outstanding debt. So for instance, with the $500 million, we have a strategy that says people who are owed $1 million or less, that's contractors and service providers, we are going to settle them in full. Persons who are owed between 1 and 5 million, we are going to give them at this time a percentage of what they are owed, with the recognition that the smaller service providers and contractors are the ones who are most exposed and need their debt to be settled almost immediately. We, in that 14-month period, what we hope to do is to sit with the medium-sized and larger contractors and come up with what we call a payment plan. So there is a strategy, there is a time frame.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Garcia. With respect to the restructuring exercise, at what stage of the entire restructuring exercise is the HDC currently at? Are you at the stage where you have a cost in mind on how much it is going to cost to restructure into the 3 subsidiaries?
Okay. So to answer the first part of the question, we have done the very preliminary works. We have registered the companies. We are in the process of appointing the boards, and we are in the process of recruiting the staff. We are yet at this point to quantify what in a definitive way, because we have Pricewaterhouse working with us to come up with that question you asked as to what is going to be the cost. We should be able to provide that in the coming weeks. I would say give us 3 to 4 weeks, and we would be in a position to supply that part of the question.
Okay, thank you. And my final question before I allow my other colleagues a chance to ask their questions. Now, previous members alluded to the fact that a factor that the HDC has highlighted in their submissions is that you have a continued problem of the deteriorating financial performance of the HDC. What makes the HDC and the Ministry of Housing confident that this restructuring exercise that includes the branching off into 3 subsidiaries going to improve significantly the financial performance of the current structure? And also, what is the timeline we are talking about before you can actually see results of improved financial performance?
Okay, I would go first, and I would probably ask the MD if I leave a gap. So the first bit is that these 3 companies will be laser focused on their various responsibilities. So let us take the facilities company, for instance. The facility companies, through a combination of the management companies and the collection of rents, would allow us to have a balance between expenditure and income. And how are we going to achieve that? We have been in preliminary discussions with the Ministry of Local Government to take some of the responsibilities that HDC now bears, such as the cleaning of drains, the collection of garbage, and the cutting of grass in the public areas. That cost, which is substantial, if those responsibilities were to be handed over to where they rightly should be, that is to the regional corporation, would significantly reduce the burden that HDC now carries for the maintenance of these properties. So that is that company. In respect to the construction company, because we are going to be driven in the sense of project management and project implementation, we are going to ensure that what we build is within budget and that what we build is sufficient when we sell to meet a substantial portion of that company's expenditure. And with the new pricing policy, the subsidies will kick in, so at least we have a balanced budget. In respect of the asset management company, we expect to have a slight surplus because some of the works that are now outsourced would be done internally, such as the preparation of deeds and various contracts. So that the restructuring is supposed to relieve the HDC as it is now from that continuing financial deterioration, as you put it. Deterioration, as you put it.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Chairman Garcia, one thing. I don't want you to put your figures, you can submit that in writing. If you could give us an idea of the anticipated sort of savings you foresee for the, what you call it, I think it was the facilities company, which you said that you're trying to hive off some of the functions of, say, cleaning drains, cutting grass. What kinds of savings you anticipate? The other thing is, so that you could give us that in writing, as regards I think it's the assets management company, when you're talking about things that are outsourced being done in-house, is it you currently have the capability to do it and the adequate staff to do it, and it's not done? And if not, does it mean that you're going to be carrying then in your facilities company a greater, not a facilities, assets management company, a greater staff, a higher staff component in contrast to what exists, say, in your legal department? Because I see you have legal officers, you have conveyancing officers, title search clerks and so on. You're going to then have to hire more people and therefore possibly have a higher administrative cost.
Okay, let me answer the first question, which will provide in writing what is the likely savings. The grass cutting, the drain cleaning, and the garbage collection runs approximately at $12 million a month. 12 million by 12 is 144 million. So we can see not all of it will go, but I would say a large portion of it, as much as 80-something% of it would go. So we anticipate at minimum of 85 to 90-something million dollar savings. In respect to the asset company, a number of the deeds and the preparation of other legal instruments are really run-of-the-mill and does not require a huge amount of staff to be done. The more complex work, we will still continue to outsource it. So at this point, we do not see the need to have more staff. What we see the need to have is to work smarter and to increase productivity.
Okay, so can I ask, why hasn't it been done now or before? Why you need a restructuring to do it? Because I share the view that a lot of the conveyancing is standard.
Chairperson, a number of the issues that the HDC now finds itself in is one, what I will term cultural issues, how culture has developed. Two, we operate in a highly unionized environment that at times specify certain arrangements. And three, the focus that is required is not there. And that is why we are restructuring that rather than the asset management company get caught up in day-to-day activities that does not necessarily concern them, will no longer form that part of their responsibility. And to use the term, they become more laser focused.
All right, so thank you. I'm going to call on member Maurice Julian, but just one last thing. I'm talking. I see you all mentioned something, and maybe your managing director could answer that about team building, and come back again to the point just made up by your chairman about culture and so on. Have you all done team building, and when last have you all done that? Because you're carrying the same people into your various companies. So how do you change culture?
So the HDC tends to change culture through various methods. One such method is the employment or the engagement of a consultant who would look at our performance management systems. The systems would be extended to reward and recognition as opposed to currently only being for performance management. We intend to roll out a series of programs for our staff members. We have started some small wins, which includes like Certificate of Excellence. 2 departments have since received same. And for Christmas and the upcoming years, we intend to have to start our employee engagement through our annual Christmas events and so on. In addition to this, the HDC has become, I would want to say, highly competitive. I know departments, we have started our digitization, and I know that the staff is enthused about it. We've recently started having departmental monthly meetings. Each manager of a division is required to huddle on a weekly basis to look at the objectives and the goals and to see if they were achieved. And finally, the HDC has started to have biannual meetings with its staff. We've had 2 so far. The last one, I think it was in August, where we had over 300 persons logging in on Zoom and divisional managers presenting to the staff where we are, what each department is currently doing. So everybody is on board as to what is happening in the organization. So we are building that team spirit and trying to engage the culture change.
Thank you very much, Managing Director. Member Maurice Julian.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have several questions, but they're all short. And I'm not sure if it's Ms. McFarlane or Mr. Garcia who can help me. But the first, I would like to find out about COVID-19 and its impact on HDC and the Ministry of Housing. And I know you all have moved forward and I see good work happening everywhere, but I still, of course, would like to know about what occurred during that COVID period time and how it was dealt with. And secondly, I also have a question concerning the historical buildings, for example, in Maloney. I was happy to learn that you all are going to invest more money into the upkeep, etc. But I'm also concerned about the historical tenants. When I say historical, I mean those who inherited from great-grandmother, died since, and they are still there. What is the process for someone to move across to get in the apartment in their name? And finally, with regards to areas like Malabar, for example, the abandoned houses, where there were unique agreements with what was NHA at the time. For the land would be HDC's land, and the house would be, we have a lot of abandoned houses. So I'm wondering, what is the process in the future moving forward with that? Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
So Managing Director, this may be for you, or is it for the chairman? I think it may be for you.
So I'll have our Divisional Manager of Corporate Services answer the question with regards to the rentals at Maloney. Mr. Ramhoop Singh will answer the question as it relates to the Maloney Gardens. And I would go with the answers for COVID. So as everyone may be aware, COVID did present challenges to most companies, with HDC not being an exception. However, it created a lot of opportunities for the HDC in its digitization trust. Whilst it reduced the number of houses that were constructed and it delayed our construction program, it also allowed us to review our business processes to become more efficient. So that is my answer for COVID. I take you over to Jeremy to answer the question on the occupancy.
Good day, members. Thank you, MD. So the traditional rental stock of the HDC is guided by the Cabinet Note of 1982, October 14th. What it says is that persons who are in a low income bracket are the ones who would have been allocated those properties. So when we have to transfer a person from occupancy or transfer the kids, we need to be very mindful of what those persons' incomes are. We can't put somebody whose income is 20,000, 15,000 in a traditional rental. What the HDC has done throughout the years is that we would have assessed the families. So for example, when you become a owner of a traditional rental, we have what is called a family particulars, which would list the occupants of the unit as well as the principal tenant. If the principal tenant passes away, because we'd already had that data, we will then assess them to see if their financial situation would have changed. However, we are not in a position to throw out the occupants, but we do look at those factors before we just hand over traditional rental stock to the persons who are there. What we try to do is to allow for social mobility. So if the persons and the occupants are able to qualify for something else at a higher price point, we would have those persons assessed and then put them onto the newer stock areas. With respect to the units that are being seen as vacant, I believe the MD said to pass it over to Mr. Lamarak. Well, I could speak to the vacant units. So as the member would have indicated, historically, the HDC had what is called the infill program. This program was one where the HDC would have had land and customers would have come into the HDC and would have been given certain unit types to construct, either a D3, split level unit, or a flat. What would have happened historically is that persons would have been given a 10-year or 3-year lease to construct the properties by. A lot of these units would have been sold under this program. The challenge that arises, unfortunately, moving forward, is that some of these persons may have a deed. So it's very difficult to divorce the deed from the land. But it's something that the HDC is actively working on, and we are very aware of the locations where this is occurring. I can pass it back to the end.
Mr. Campbell, might I ask what kind of success you all have had in migrating, I would call them dependents of original tenants from your traditional tenancies to other more modern ones? What kind of success you had? Because with the traditional tenancies, you're paying like $100 a month. And if you're lucky, we're paying your light bill and your water bill too.
Right.
Okay? You're now saying, let me carry it to offer you something else at a higher rental. Okay? More modern, but if I was so inclined, I wouldn't still be in the $100 a month. What kind of success have you measured that?
So it is something that we can provide to the team, but what we did, Madam Chairman, is that we would have built in certain metrics and KPIs to manage these things. So for example, when somebody gets a traditional rental, they would normally be given a 3-year term. When we do the assessment and we realize that X would have passed away and they want to pass it off to their kids, and we realize that the person's income are above the 1982 cabinet limit of $4,500, we basically would give them a 1-year term. They won't get the 3-year term. So within that 1-year term, they would be advised, because of your income, we cannot regularize or leave you in this particular state. We are going to assess you via TTMF or the bank, wherever they choose, and then see how they could transition to another unit. We would have had numerous customers, for example, in Nelson Street, who would have, their incomes would have grown to 20,000 and they would have been allocated to various areas. But I can't provide the data to the team as we move forward. Nothing
So you track the data?
We do.
Okay, so you have that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that.
No problem.
Okay, so I wanted to really find out, I wanted to switch a bit to your internal audit function. Okay, I see, yes, you have an internal audit department. I see you have some vacancies. Okay, and I think I've also seen somewhere in the submission that you had been making efforts to fill those vacancies. So if I can get an idea of where you all are with that, what the current structure is like in terms of bodies in positions.
Hi, good afternoon. We have had a recently approved structure, and it has been increased significantly. We now have 12 internal auditors on our new structure, 2 seniors, 1 manager, internal audit, and the head. And we are actually in the process of recruiting more auditors. This week, the ad is going to go out, and we're going to have more bodies into the internal audit department.
Okay, so I mean, it's really comforting to see that you have increased your number of staff, but your current staff right now, so your structure is not entirely filled. Your current staff right now, is it sufficient to carry out your audit functions?
It's not sufficient moving forward. So as
when you mean moving forward, you mean in your 3 companies you're talking, or you're talking like next week?
Yes, like next week, because as I mentioned, we have the ads going out this week, and we're going to recruit 3 new bodies to come in to assist with the internal audit activity.
Okay, so how has your historic deficiencies in staff affected the audit department carrying out its internal audit function?
Well, we basically have 3 categories of audits that we do. We do certified pension and leave records and pension certified records or statements. This will be for the retired employees, both monthly and daily. Then we have post-implementation reviews, where we would look back at all the recommendations that would have been approved by the board and make sure that the process owners would have implemented them as intended. And then we have audits that come through the office of the MD, the audit committee, and the board. So that will be our annual audit plan. So with more bodies, sorry, you're going to say something? Okay, with more bodies, we'd be able to do more of the annual audit plan audits, which is based on risk.
Okay, so I'm so happy to hear Ms. Trimbailey talk about their annual audit plan, because while you all spoke about the review of the audit charter in the submission, I found it was silent on the annual audit plan. So that what I can ask is if you can provide to the committee what the annual audit plan is for fiscal year 2023, and also provide what the annual audit plan was for fiscal 2022, what audits you completed, and what were the findings, okay, and how those recommendations have been implemented.
No problem. And you want those in writing, right? Yes?
Yes, please.
No problem.
Okay, so that would assist us considerably in understanding how the audit function works. All right, so at this stage, I invite Member Bodo to ask any questions which she may wish to ask.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take us back to a fire that took place at Sherford Courts and Charlotte Street in June of this year and relate that to a newspaper report that indicated that the HCC had spent almost $34 million on a fire suppression program at some 65 apartment buildings over 4 stories high. Of course, an unfortunate incident, but one of the issues that the HDC must be concerned about in terms of safety and fire suppression. So I just wanted an update as to whether that it was indicated that there would be some retrofitting taking place at some of these older apartment buildings. So I don't know, through you, Chair, if I can get an update as to where we are in terms of this retrofitting and in terms of the expenditure that would have been incurred. Is that possible to get an update?
So I think, MD, that may be a question either for you or that you could direct to the relevant member of staff.
Sure, Chair, I'd have Larry McDonald take this question.
Good afternoon again, Chair and members. The HDC would have undertaken a fire suppression program sometime in 2013, 2014. It was a 12 zones were identified. Zones 1 to 4 would have formed part of the first zone, and they would have been substantially completed at the time, but treating what we consider to be the highest priority buildings at that point. However, the financial circumstances of the company coming right after that program, that first phase of that program, saw that program halt due to a simple financial inability to be able to move forward with it. It has recently been back on the table, and the Project Development and Oversight Division has been working with the Toronto Fire Service to try to make sure that we are doing the right things, and we are finding an optimum solution to make sure that we could make all our buildings, especially the high-rise buildings, safe for occupation, and to protect against unwanted fires. It's something that I consider to be among the top priority things for the company at this point. But I would like to, having said all that, I would like to ask that we provide the details of the plan and maybe the timeline for the execution of it to the committee in writing at a later date, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you would have answered the second question, which I was going to ask in terms of the details. But could you perhaps tell us, Mr. McDonald, whether in view of the unfortunate incident that particular complex, Sherford Courts, whether that particular building has now been retrofitted with the appropriate fire suppression equipment and appliances and so on?
That building has not yet been retrofitted, sir, but as a 6-story building, at that height, it remains among the very top priority for us once this program gets on the way again, and which we hope to be very soon. But it has not been so retrofitted to date.
And for the sake of the public and those residents in that particular building who obviously would be quite anxious, can you clarify in terms of high priority, a time frame perhaps? Are you in a position to commit to that?
I'm not in position to give a definitive time frame. However, as I said, that building is likely to be among the first. Once the program restarts, it will be among the first ones to be attended to, because of the issue of the fire that happened, and because it fits the criteria for what we consider the highest priority buildings to be, the most exposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
You finished, Dr. Bodo?
Yeah, for now, thank you.
Yes, yes, Member Mark?
I'm sure you hear me?
We are hearing you vaguely, but We're not seeing you either.
You're not seeing me either? I don't understand why.
Okay, so maybe we see if we could fix your technical challenge on this end, and I will revert. Okay, we have you now. Yes.
Madam Chair, I have a few questions I'd like to, with your leave, to seek clarification on. HDC is reported to have spent some $126 million in carrying out what's called.
Member Mark, just 1 minute. I think there's a technical challenge on this end that we're barely hearing you. So I'm going to ask you if you could just hold a while. I'm having them address it on this end, and then I'll call you back. Okay? I'm sorry. Yes, Member Buddha, is your hand up or is, all right. Okay, so if I could just ask the managing director, she spoke about the digitization thrust, which COVID advanced. And I think it was in 2017 where you all had some incidents with your computer crashing and loss of records. And I wanted to find out what were lessons learned, if any. How do you, with this digitization trust, protect yourselves from such kinds of recurrences? If you have redundancies, and what is sort of your risk policy in terms of your reliance on digitization?
So the HDC intends to heavily rely on digitization for efficiencies and effectiveness of our operations. Our risk policy is basically and essentially to mitigate the risk that can occur if data is lost. In order to do this, the HDC, and arising from the situation in 2017, the HDC determined what was the main cause of the data loss, which was multiple hard drive failure. And the HDC looked at the impact of the loss, where it really centered. It related mainly to HR and finance, and what recovery efforts were implemented. And as a consequence, the HDC has reviewed its preventative maintenance as well as its the storage of the data in a location that where it can be recovered. So in terms of the risk policy, we looked at the data recovery sites. We looked also at SLA agreements with the vendors. We looked at the maintenance in terms of parts and so for our systems. And so far, based on what has been put in place, we are have not had a reoccurrence of such again.
Okay. Thank you very much. And that carries me back to Ms. Stream Bailey in terms of you indicated to us that a lot of your audit function is in the area of certified pension and leave records and so on. And from what the managing director spoke of, the failure affected HR. How have you been able to do your audits coming forward? Because I would expect it would have affected information to do these certified pension and leave records for former and employees. How has that, and how have you dealt with that challenge for your internal audit?
Thankfully, Madam Chair, it actually did not affect us because it didn't, because most of our pension and leave, they usually start from 2005. So the previous years that the employees would have been audited already. So that loss of data did not affect us in the current term.
Okay, and while I have you here, might I ask you to explain something that exists in the submission that I have a little trouble in understanding? And it says, HDC indicated that audit investigations are conducted upon request and that no such requests were made of the Internal Audit Department in the recent past.
Right. So we
Could you explain to me what that is saying?
Sure. We interpreted that question to be fraud, if there were any fraudulent investigations. So I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but usually our audits would come through the Office of the Managing Director, the Audit Committee, or the Board. So in the recent past, we hadn't had any such requests regarding any fraud investigations.
Okay, I understand. And in terms of your audits, are they just assurance audits, or do you do advisory audits also?
We have done mostly assurance.
Okay.
But we can do advisory in certain aspects, just to make sure we don't cross the lines of our independence.
Yeah. And do you have any plans to do any advisory ones within this fiscal year?
No, not any advisory, only assurance.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's try Member Mark again. Member Mark? Okay, so it appears that his challenge is not yet addressed, so I'll move to Member Ryan. I believe you have some questions to ask.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to revert back to one of the issues that were mentioned very early on during the conversation. And I know it was mentioned that the amount owed by renters at present for traditional units is $47 million. But we didn't get the figure for lease to own, rent to own, and commercial. So is it possible to get an aggregate figure of the amount of rent owed to the HDC at present?
Sure. So the amounts relating to license to occupy, it's approximately $1,634,000. The amounts for rent to own approximately amounts to $162,000, and the amounts overall to the HDC at this time is I would have to provide that information to you, as I do not have a total summary on this report.
Okay, we will gladly accept that in writing. But what I also noticed in your submission as well was that you all alluded to the fact that there is a low acceptance of current rental stock. Could you elaborate on that and explain to the committee what exactly that means, and also what are some factors contributing to this?
Hi, good day, members. So when you say demand of low rental stock, I'm not sure if I quite understand, but just to give some context, where we have traditional rentals, these are in areas that were built since 1945. For example, in 1945 is where the Independence Square development was built. Most of the traditional rentals, as advised by the MD, mainly in Port of Spain, then we have in Maloney, and then we have Couva, and then in Bacadere, Lady Hills, and San Fernando. So I'm not sure exactly the question, but those are where we have traditional rental stock. The majority of units that we have right now, we are trying to sell. Now, obviously, HDC has a social mandate, so we would put customers what is called a temporary rental until they can qualify to purchase those new units. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
Not entirely. In your submission, you all would have noted that there are three challenges faced in the distribution of homes. One are remedial works. The second one deals with defects identified during the customer inspection. And the final one was low acceptance of current rental stock.
Okay, so I could provide some color to that question. As Jeremy would have indicated, our current rental stock are our traditional rental units, and therefore there's little demand for those units because of the areas and the
Sure, let me give you a call back now.
Yeah, because of the type of units and the location, the HDC has embarked on a social housing program that will be rolled out in the coming periods, where we are increasing our rental units, our rental units in various areas. One such area is citrus growers and almond court. So we are looking at creating modern rental units and to add to our current stock of rental units.
Okay, thank you. With respect to stalled projects, you all gave some information on stalled projects in Annex 3 of your submission. And what I noticed was that of the 40 projects listed in Annex 3, categorized as stalled, majority of them were at least 60% completed. So my question is, how soon could we expect these stalled projects to come back on stream and to be completed? And what are the cost overruns? What are the length of time these projects have been stalled? And the final question is, what are the cost overruns incurred from these projects being stalled?
So member, do you want an oral answer for that, or that's something we'll take in writing?
We could take it in writing.
Yeah, because I think for a comprehensive response, we should take that in writing. Thank you very much. Do you have another question, member Deodorant?
No.
Okay, not for now. So I believe I saw member Mark. Yes. So member Mark, we'll take you now. I think the problems have been rectified.
Are you hearing me, Madam Chair? Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, with your guidance, you will tell me if the answer should be in writing or they can facilitate an answer immediately. I wanted to ask Mr. Garcia or the managing director whether legislative changes would be required given the restructuring of the HDC with the formation of these 3 subsidiary companies, or would there not be any need for legislative changes? I just want to get clarification on that.
Madam Chair, I want to answer that. The board sought advice, and the advice was, given what we were doing, it was within the mandate of the HDC to form subsidiary companies, and therefore there was no need for any amendment to the HDC Act.
Would that, Mr. Garcia, would this require, would the unions that are now entrenched at HDC and given the formation of these new companies, would these unions be automatically recognized in these 3 new companies, or would they have to compete in forming, let's say, new operations within those 3 new companies? I'm just trying to determine that.
What is envisioned is that there will be no change in staff complement at the HDC. However, these 3 companies, and you would have seen the ads in the newspaper, would advertise all of its positions, and any member of staff of the HDC or of the general public is free to apply. Therefore, in this arrangement, if the workers of that company or those companies want union representation, there's a process to go through. But there's no automatic recognition of the existing trade unions that currently represent the workers of the HDC.
Mr. Garcia, would these workers who are going to be hired in terms of tenure of security, are they going to be on contract, or do you anticipate permanence over a period of time, or is there going to be, a contractual arrangement in these 3 new companies?
In the first instance, there will be contractual arrangements, but what was agreed is that once the boards are appointed and the general managers and the core staff are in place, they would be charged with developing a business plan for a 2-year period. And within that 2-year period, the questions of tenure of employment and form and fashion would be thrashed out in that arrangement of the board, the general manager, and the core staff working with a business plan that is developed with the help of a consultant. So I don't want to be premature and say the staff will be contract or permanent. In the first instance, yes, it will be contract. But as we get into operationalizing the companies, we would be guided by the business plan and the direction that comes out of that plan.
Do you think, Mr. Garcia, at the end of the day, workers who are currently engaged at the HDC, once they reach retirement age, do you anticipate replacement, or do you think that there will be almost like attrition through retrenchment, and therefore what you'll have is these 3 new companies really replacing ultimately what you currently have as an HDC? Do you anticipate any such development in the future?
At this point, no. And I say at this point, what we have been in extensive discussions with the unions, the managing director has held lengthy meetings with both unions. So too has the Minister of Housing. She has met with the unions and given certain assurances. So that at this point, all I can say is that we do not anticipate any retrenchment, attrition, or any form of job loss.
Madam Chair, I just want to ask either Mr. Garcia or the Managing Director, this is a current issue. Can the agency indicate to this committee at what meeting of your board was the decision taken to construct 3 apartment buildings in a school zone on Touch Street in San Fernando? Can you clear the air on that?
I will take that question. As chairman of the board, I can say that no such decision has been taken to construct 3 apartments. What decision has been taken is to examine the possibility and therefore to engage in preliminary assessment to see if the site, as many other sites, we are currently looking at sites at Citrus Growers at Lavin Hill. We are looking at sites in Arima. We are looking at sites in Hoover, in Dabadee, throughout Trinidad and Tobago. What I can assure this committee is that the HDC adheres to the law, and the law prescribes a process that the HDC has to engage in before it builds any unit. So, to sum up, no such decision has been taken to construct. What the decision has been taken is to do the assessment, and at a point, the management will come to the board with a recommendation, and the board would either accept or reject. And we expect that the management who are accustomed with this process will adhere to the processes that govern the construction of HDC units.
Mr. Garcia, can you advise this committee or inform this committee why that site was chosen by the HDC when lands are available on the outskirts of San Fernando for home constructions like Golconda, Union Hall, and Davie? Can you share with this committee why that site was chosen?
And one of the things that the HDC is doing is seeking to build houses where the demand is greatest. In San Fernando, in the city of San Fernando, there is a high demand for houses. What we do once there's available state land, that is our first resort. Once there's state land and that is available, we do the assessment to see if housing can provide. The committee should note that we have currently over 191,000 people on our database, and therefore, with a finite amount of land, so we don't have land that is infinite. Therefore, wherever land, and I use the word state land, is available, the agency seeks to build. We are also guided by where the demand is the highest. So yes, there's land in Golconda, yes, there's land in Moruga, yes, there's land in Blanchisseuse, but we would be hesitant to putting up an agency development in Blanchisseuse because the demand is just not there. Whereas in San Fernando, in that particular location, there is a high demand for housing in the city. We have other sites that we intend to develop. There's Lady Hales that we are looking at. We are completing the development of Carlton Lane. So the perception is that we simply chose a site arbitrarily. No, we didn't. There is a process, and as I tell the staff, the process sometimes at the end of it says, no, you cannot build. We respect the process. And all that I would say with Todd Street is let us trust the process. Let us trust the process.
Madam Chair, my final question to either Mr. Garcia or the MD, Managing Director, is the HDC aware that both the Ministry of Education, through its permanent secretary, and I have a copy of the letter with me, as well as the Planning Ministry, Town and Country, have rejected this proposal to erect apartments on that particular site that you all have identified. And there are several stakeholders in the community that have expressed their reservations about this particular development. Can you share with us your perspective given those realities?
Okay, so Member Mark, I just wanted, just before you answer, Mr. Garcia, I just wanted to be a little careful about the choice of word when you use identified, because all I'm hearing from the chairman is that it's something that is being explored, and okay, identified may have a different connotation.
Yes, so I am guided.
Okay.
So, deal with the two letters, which I don't have in front of me, but I would trust my memory, and you will guide me if my memory is in fact failing. The letter from the Town and Country was not a rejection of an application. The letter speaks to an inquiry. And in that letter, if I recall, in either the second or the third paragraph, it speaks to the site being zoned for urban development. And that if the Ministry of Education has no objection, we can submit an application. That's the first, my recollection. In respect to the Ministry of Education, I have seen in the public domain, sometimes people have letters that I don't have, a letter from the permanent secretary that says that the ministry has plans for that site. I have in my possession a letter written by the Minister of Education saying that the ministry has no objection. Based on that letter and based on the Town and Country letter, the HDC submitted an application for outline approval, and that is still pending. And that is why I'm saying, one, HDC respects the law, and two, let us trust the process.
Madam Chair, my final question to my colleague, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia, can I ask you, the letter from the Ministry of Education, which I can pass on to the chairman and your good self, is dated sometime, if I believe, is 20th of March, given in no objection. But the one from the permanent secretary is dated the 27th of July. So I myself am a bit confused as to which letter which letter is the HDC working on? Is it the March letter or the letter that is dated that I have in my possession, 27th of July, 2022? I'm not too sure.
Just now, Member Mark, one, at this stage, one, this is not fully the subject of the inquiry. I've allowed it because it's in the public domain. But if I've understood what the chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Garcia, what the chairman has said thus far, he has seen in the public domain a letter, which I believe is one of the letters you're talking about, that he doesn't have in his possession. He has another one in his possession. That's the one that he's working with. So that, based on the responses thus far, the question that you are asking, I think is not fair. He has said what his position is based on something that he has. You seem to have two things. So I can't see how he can answer his working on one that he said that he has no knowledge of, except that he's seen it somewhere out there, but it hasn't come to him.
Madam Chair, I'm guided by your good self, but I want to just put for your consideration, and I will forward it to you, and you can forward it to Mr. Garcia. So Mr. Garcia, if he's not aware of this letter, I want to make him aware through you and our committee. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Mark. Okay, so I see, I will take Member Julian and then Member Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the Managing Director. In my particular area, and I've noticed it coming up from time and time again in other areas, the management companies and developments with apartments and townhouses where a monthly payment of, I think, $200 is deducted and placed in escrow. There seems to be some delay. Is this a nationwide delay or is this just for certain developments? I'd just like an update regarding that.
Okay, so it would not be a nationwide delay. We have over 85 management companies which we are working with. Specific to your circumstance, I would have to get the information and give you feedback to that specifically.
Okay, but I'm really asking generally, when there's a delay such as that, what is the cause? With the management companies, the escrow?
Well, in order for the management company to function, a board must be in place. Oftentimes, the HDC have difficulties in getting residents to step up to run the companies. And perhaps that's the reason why there's that issue with your company.
Okay. Now, I have one more question regarding the HDC maintenance units in addressing defects. What's the normal procedure? Because someone just from the public spoke about Edinburgh South housing units, apartments, mold, plumbing, sewage issues. And the areas I was speaking about besides Napoyo, it will be Real Spring, Valsane, and Edinburgh South developments.
All right. So the process for repairs or remediations to unit is as follows. The homeowners are required to provide to the HDC a list of defects within 3 months of taking over the unit or the keys being handed over. From that initial list of defects, the HDC then has to enter into a procurement exercise where a scope has to be ascertained, and then there is the process of inviting contractors to bid to make the repairs for the homeowners.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Managing Director, what is the average response time? For example, if I have an issue and I report it after, how long will it take to be seen about, assessed?
Sure, go ahead.
That's it. That's it.
How long will it take? Okay, so it depends on many factors. Sometimes we may not have the required staff at the time due to the demand or the workload. That's one factor. The other factor can be after visiting the site or the units, we have to engage in a procurement process, and sometimes this can be lengthy. We would provide we would create profiles where we would invite persons to tender on our e-tender platform, and many times the response rate is low, and so we need to go back out again. Barring that, if it's not a complicated issue, our staff would conduct the remediation of the units.
Thank you very much. Hopefully the maintenance company will be able to handle all these in the very near future. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask the Managing Director, because it's something that also bothered me when I saw your matrix for the application process. There are no timelines. You have a matrix, I think it's Appendix 1. There's no timeline. Your answer just now, again, no timelines. I would expect there is some aspiration, okay, or some intention, so that when you do these charts, there's an anticipated best practice time that you're aiming for. Other things may happen in an individual case, but I don't seem to be getting that. So if it were that my maintenance is something that you had to get tenders for, what is the anticipated time? It might vary in a particular instance, but our target is it takes 6 weeks. I'm not getting that in your submission or in this discussion.
Okay, I'll have Manager of Procurement and Contracts answer this question.
And just before you pass it out to him, I don't know who will also address the issue I said about the matrix from my application going in to my going into a home. If I had everything ideally done, what is the anticipated time frame?
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
Or the shortest time frame then?
All right, okay, awesome, everyone. So from a procurement context, at this point in time, we have an average of 55-day turnaround time frame in our tendering from the initiation to the award, and this involves all our tendering, our large contracts, small and medium contracts, and the remediation works. On the remediation side, we have an average turnaround of 2 weeks with regards to inviting individuals and to get the response, as highlighted by the MD. We have been, there's this myth out there that contractors are banging down the door of the HDC for work, but when we send out our tenders, we're not getting that corresponding response from them. And that is largely in part to some of them, when we do our analysis and we call back to them, they have indicated either the HDC is owing them, the contractor, some sum of money, and they really and truly can't carry this project at this point in time. So what we are actually doing is trying to improve, and we are recognizing the payment aspect to improve the response time. So we do have a 2-week time frame for some of the remedial works, and without barring the issues with regards to non-response or low response, we definitely turn around. Additionally, outside of the tendering aspect, we have the internal staff to do the remediation once we have the materials provided to our internal staff.
Thank you. And as far as the timelines with respect to the application to the Amina home, so that what I could ask is if that schematic could be reworked and be submitted in writing, I'd be grateful. Okay, so I call on Member Mitchell. After Member Mitchell, Member Dionarine, and then Member Mark. Member Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a number of questions. But the first one, I want to take some issue with the number being bandied about of 190,000 persons on the database. Now, I think previously, I'm not sure if it's still with the Ministry of Housing. And I also know that the HDC is focused on being digitally driven. But don't you accept, and this is from my experience, but don't you accept that that number could be very misleading? In my experience, at least 3 out of 10 persons, if they are called to the HDC to undergo an assessment, they are found to be ineligible in accordance with the criteria. So the question is, when last have you scrubbed the list to see whether a person's circumstances have changed in that they have purchased homes or they have, by some other means, gained interest in property, so that this list could truly reflect the demand for low-cost housing in Trinidad and Tobago? As the first question.
Okay, good day, member. I could respond to that question. So it is an exercise we actually started. What we have realized from the data, so currently, as of now, October 12th, 2022, that's the last date that we got the data from the ministry, which is HAPS. There was 195,840 persons. When we analyzed that data, when we did the HAPS relaunch some months ago, we realized that there are persons on the database that are 114 years old. Obviously, we understand that these persons are probably deceased. So what we started to do, we started to have 3 criteria to clear up the list. 1, persons that would have passed away. 2, persons that would have had property. And 3, persons who are not citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, you cannot be allocated a home if you are not a citizen, but persons still apply on the database, and it is captured. What we have been advised by the ministry is that this may take them some time because they don't have the information as to who has property. That is something that I think they need to liaise with the Ministry of Legal Affairs. But it is something that we have started to work on, and we believe the same thing, that the numbers may actually shrink once those 3 criteria are addressed.
Member Mitchell, if you may just permit me one intervention, and based on that point, that application form, couldn't it be used as a better tool to assist you in doing a sifting? In that you ask somebody to say whether they have land, and they take yes or no, but you come back at some later stage for a verification. Okay, couldn't all of that be dealt with in your application form so that your application form is supported by the requisite affidavit? There's some other requirement I can't remember that is there that, you know, you could, I would suggest that you could ask people to send the supporting documentation so that your database doesn't capture me just because I've sent in an application. So the scrubbing is one part in terms of you have my application there 15 years, whether I'm still interested, whether I'm still qualified or not. But even from the commencement, so has there been any consideration at all at reviewing what your form asks an applicant to submit?
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. So basically, the data that we do capture, which is managed by the ministry, it actually shows how much customers applied for that are within a certain income range, where they live, where they would have wanted to apply to, and that kind of data. So that data actually would assist the HDC moving forward with where we can construct units and at what price point. So it is an exercise that we're actually currently working on getting done, where we utilize the data. So that is something that we're actively currently working on, Madam Chair.
So, Madam Chair, I would like to further add to our HAFS database, the HAFS database that is owned by the ministry. The HDC is currently in an exercise to revamp that entire system. It was a manual system whereby applications were made manually and then data entered. It's now real-time and automatic. Persons who are interested in applying to HDC for homes go to our database and make their applications online. Secondly, the second phase of the automation of this, or the digitization of the HAFS database, is where the HDC would be engaging the Ministry of Legal Affairs to determine if there's some sort of sharing of data in terms of depth and in terms of property ownership, whereby the data that is on their database can be swept, or well, it can sweep the HDC, the HAFS database, to remove these applicants at least once a month. So we have started a program with that, where the HDC would be where we would be in agreement with the Ministry of the Attorney General, Ministry of Legal, to have that database updated automatically once a month.
Thank you so much for the indulgence, Member Mitchell.
Thank you very much. The second of 4 questions is, it really does pain me and pained me as a member of Parliament to learn of these tenant landlords, persons who are in receipt of a tenancy from the HDC, paying $100 rent or $500 rent, and then subletting the same units because they may have migrated or they may have gone into other accommodation, perhaps even owned accommodation, and they are subsequently subletting these units to persons who are deserving of homes for prices upwards of $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month. What have you all put in place to stop this practice?
So I will take part of the question and our divisional manager of legal will take the other. So the HDC was engaged or still is engaged in a rental verification exercise. I could provide to the committee the percentage completion of this exercise. We have also updated our lease and rental agreement with the tenants, and we have also started enforcing illegal occupation of our units as it relates to these situations. Kimberly, I don't know if you would like to add anything else.
Good afternoon again, members. So in instances where the HDC determines that there has been an illegal arrangement and somebody is in occupation of HDC property and paying rent to a third party, the HDC assesses this person in occupation and takes active steps to either regularize the person or to have the person evicted based on the conditions that surround the occupation and based on whether or not the person is quote unquote a good tenant. Meaning if there are instances where the person in occupation is creating a nuisance or otherwise disturbing the peace, then the HDC will take action to terminate that, well, to have the person quit the property and to then also terminate the relationship between the HDC and the lawful tenant who is not in occupation.
Okay, so just a follow-up on that. I know it might be very difficult, but isn't it possible to provide 3-year leases to your tenants and have them come in and be assessed every 3 years to determine whether or not they still qualify for HDC accommodation, or
Yes,
whether or not they are in, yeah? Go ahead.
Yes, it is. And in fact, the term of the rental agreement that the HDC offers is 3 years or for a shorter period. Of course, this is somewhat of a new initiative. So whilst we're doing and implementing the assessment at that stage for the new agreements, we're still working backwards to deal with situations where there may be tenancy arrangements that were not renewed when the HDC was calling upon persons to renew them. So it's a 2-tiered operation.
Okay, thank you. And the other issue I wanted to touch on both of them, it has to do with one of your largest assets, your receivables. So if I could put it out in a 2-part question, is there still an auditing company auditing the payment records of your clients? If yes, what are the terms of reference and what is the status of those audits? And secondly, I know that one of the biggest bugbears that inhibits the HDC's ability to convert to mortgages or to complete the conveyance of your properties and receive your monies would be your deficient land management practices. So the vesting issues, the outstanding statutory approval issues. What is the HDC doing presently, apart from separating your companies and having them focused on each activity? What are you all doing now to monetize those receivables, or quickly liquidate those receivables, I should say, having regard to these 2 issues, the auditing of your records and your land management outstanding issues?
Okay, thank you, member. I would take the first 2 questions. Yes, there is a company that is reviewing our receivables. Currently at this time, 2014, 15, and 16 has been completed. And from 2018 to present, it's approximately 60% completed. In terms of the status, in terms of the receivables, what HDC is doing currently to address the receivable issues, the HDC has started due to COVID and due to most financial agencies giving moratorium on payments. What the HDC did instead of the moratorium would have been to, well, not actively engage in evictions. The HDC, however, has started a program which we have seen, which has borne some fruit, where we have segmented the recoveries portfolio, east, west, north, south, and we have cherry-picked the worst, the communities with the highest delinquency, and of that community, selected 5 of those individuals who have not paid their rent. This has borne the result of which has been that there have been 1 or 2 evictions with the remaining occupants bringing in lump sum payments as well as entering into arrangements to continue with the current rental and to make planned payments for the back arrears. In terms of the, Kimberly, would you take the third question? No, Vidal, sorry, for the approvals. My apologies.
All right. So how the HDC is dealing with the land management and statutory approvals is basically 2 phases. What we have in the first instance is that internally we have a committee comprised of core team members with the various competencies who are focused on chasing statutory approvals for both legacy and ongoing projects. So that's a committee that we have formed, and we meet regularly with updates and action items for what is required for statutory. The second phase of what we do is we, the HDC, partakes in a heads of agency meeting, which comprises of members of, or at least the heads of agencies of a majority of the statutory committees, where we deal with the bigger issues that the micro, or as I like to call it, the HDC's internal committee cannot sort out. So we are continuously working and trying to resolve the issues on the statutory approval and land management.
Okay, because I mean, you know, the problem is twofold. You have, on the one hand, you have people who are not paying or are not paying what they're supposed to pay, and the HDC is not aware of the outstanding debt. And then you have some people who have been very disciplined, making their payments, completed their payments, and would now like the conveyance of the property into their name so they can benefit from the equity. They can hand it down to their children, and they're simply unable to do that because of these deficiencies. You are aware and working towards rectifying those things.
Yes, member, we are aware and we are working towards rectifying.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, member. Member Dion Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a point of clarification. Now, my understanding was that in terms of the selection from the database, the selection of individuals from the database, was that selection is done based on a criteria where preference is given to single parents, pensioners, large families with dependent children, and persons with disabilities. That was my understanding. But upon my view, of Annex 1, which maps out the allocation process flow, the matrix as Madam Chair has referred to, it says here that the selection is done based on random selection, ministerial recommendation, joint protective services, and elderly and disabled. So which is it? And if it is what is mapped out here in the matrix, then how is the random selection? How does the random selection balance the length of time a name would be on the database? And also, how does the ministerial appointment go about it's done? Ministerial recommendation, sorry.
Okay, thank you, member. So the allocations process is guided by the cabinet note where there's the 60, 25, 10, and 5%. What the agency would try to do is that if a family member has 5 kids, for example, we won't put them in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Sorry, hold on.
Sorry?
Could you just clarify 65, 25, 10?
No.
What is that?
So the cabinet note of 2008, September 25th, it's 60% random selection, 10% joint protective, 5% for elderly and disabled, and then 10% joint, 25% ministerial, sorry. That's the cabinet note that governs allocation. So customers would fall within one of those bands. What we do is that once customers send to us and they are assessed, the type of unit that they get is based on preference and qualification, but also family size. So you wouldn't find us allocating a family of 5 kids to a 2-bedroom apartment. We try to put them in a 3-bedroom apartment. If the person has no kids, we may try to put them in a 2-bedroom apartment. So it's all based on availability and qualification.
So then what you're saying is that the random selection is done from the database that you all have or from somewhere else?
It's done from the database. The ministry would have a random selection process, and then they would inform us, and then we would assess the customers, but the agency does not randomly select persons.
And the ministerial recommendation, these are recommendations that comes from the cabinet?
It comes from the Minister of Housing.
Minister of Housing?
Yes.
Okay. And is that recommendation based on, Madam Chair, guide me, is that recommendation based on a specific criteria or like, for example, suggestions that would come from various MPs in the parliament? How is it done?
So we would get the names basically based on that criteria. 25%. The minister, I'm assuming, has the power to determine how she works that 25%. So she could split it any way, which way that she sees fit. But the agency is guided by those parameters: 60% random, 25% ministerial, 10% joint protective, 5% elderly and disabled. And the emergency customers, those who are in less fortunate circumstances, would fall in that 5%, the elderly and disabled, because they tend not to qualify to purchase.
If I can assist, Member Dean Ryan.
Is there somewhere in the submission? I can't put my hand on it now, but is there somewhere in the submission?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was about to say,
Mitchell?
I was just about to say that, it comes from recommendations from MPs, both sides of the aisle, as well as councillors.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Member Junrana, you've finished?
Yes, I'm through.
Yes, Member Mark? Member Mark is still muted. You need to.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a few questions I'd like to get clarified from our colleagues who are here. First of all, the question of vandalism. Vandalism, both at the construction phase of HDC homes, as well as the completion stage before people actually move in to those premises. We understand from the literature and from the information that it costs, like in 2021, approximately $14 million. And up to 2022, we had a cost of $6 million. Now, the question I would like to ask the HDC through the MD or the chairman, how does the HDC intend to improve the effectiveness of security to reduce the cost of repairing vandalized homes? Can I get some clarification either from the MD or from the chairman?
I see chairman hands is raised.
Let me deal with the first part of the question. Yes, vandalism is an issue with the agency. We have suffered vandalism throughout Trinidad. We have vandalism in Moruga at Pro. We had instances of vandalism at the unfinished units at Oasis. We have vandalism in the gardens, and literally throughout. What the agency has been doing is, one, engaging in discussions with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And I must say that the minister was very instrumental in leading those discussions. 2, coming up with strategies that involve both the police and private security. 3, as in the case of Oasis coming out of a recommendation from the TTPS, we have built or are in the process of building a wall around the site to prevent easy access. We are looking at a site in Bonner North, where again, we are working with the police and our IT department because we have installed cameras and improved the lighting. So vandalism is a fact of life and is part of one of the challenges that the HDC faces. In terms of the second part of the question, I wasn't too clear as to exactly what the second part of the question was. So if Senator Mark will repeat the second part.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Yes, I was just asking, what effective measures are you taking to reduce the level of vandalism to these HDC properties, either under construction or having completed construction of same? What effective measures? Because it seems that the cost continues to rise as it relates to vandalism.
So I spoke to those under construction units that have been completed. What the board and the management have agreed is that while we are waiting the closure of the mortgages, we would enter into short-term rental agreements with the would-be occupants to allow them to occupy the units so that to reduce vandalism. Because in particular, when units are completed, it takes sometimes between 90 days to as much as 200 days or even more to close the mortgages for all kinds of reasons. So a house will be completed, it will be allocated, but yet it remains unoccupied. We have come up with a strategy to address that by entering into short-term rental agreements for people to occupy pending the closure of the mortgages.
And this is true, Madam Chair. If you just go back to the pricing policy, I just want to get some clarification from you. Do you have a specific time frame for the new pricing policy to reach the cabinet? I know you wouldn't be able to tell us when a decision will be taken, but as it relates to your end of this whole process, when do you anticipate the HDC will be able to submit what you described as the new pricing policy to address the housing situation and the escalating costs of same?
Senator, as chairman of the board, I would ask the management to bring the policy to the board at its next meeting, which is the last Wednesday in November. Once the board has approved it, we will then submit it to the minister for onward transmission to cabinet.
Yeah. And the final question I'd like to raise with you is, you made a point earlier on that given the escalating costs of construction of housing units, you are thinking of going back to basics, meaning that you give people a shell and they will take their time over a period of time, let's say, to complete the finishing touches. Now, I don't want to call it a cold pot strategy, but it is heading towards that. Now, given the circumstances that we are faced with, the labor market, very depressed wages and salaries in our country, high levels of unemployment, rising costs of housing inputs. Can you share with this committee what you anticipate as some of the challenges, even though you are going to be able to save costs? But what are going to be some of the challenges you anticipate as chairman of HDC for these new homeowners who are going to be inheriting this basic structure in a climate of uncertainty, unpredictability, rising costs, among other things? I just wanted to get from you your perspective as far as you are concerned, HDC really challenges these new homeowners inheriting this basic structure will face to complete their homes given our circumstances.
Senator Mark, I want to go back into the early 80s and then in that period, 2003 to 2008. And I'll start with myself. When in 1982, I got a HDC house, what we inherited was a kitchen with one cupboard, one bathroom, no floor finishes, and we had the same economic challenges. If people remember that period, 81 to 86 was one of the most challenging periods in Trinidad's economic history. My wife and I, like all of our neighbors, we put our heads down, we took the house, and piece by piece, year by year, we saved and we finished our house. I go now into that period, 2003 to 2008. We came up with something called the infill program, which was the same basic house in Wellington Road in Debe, in Malabar, in Edinburgh, all over the country. Very basic house, one coat of paint, no floor finishes, louvers for windows. You pass by those houses now and they are virtual mansions. And these were poor people. These were not people working for 30 and 40,000. But what it demonstrated is that if you give people the opportunity for a basic house, we're not giving them a shell, we are giving them a basic house with no frills. What has happened post-2008 is that the HDC started to build nice houses, porcelain tiles, and cupboards from Young Sing, and granite tops, and ceilings that were gypsum ceilings, and that pushed the cost into the $900,000 and $1 million. And what it did, it forgot the people that HDC was supposed to be servicing. And those people are what I call the Kentucky boys, the girls working in Genoras, who are the teacher, the policeman, who work for a salary of somewhere between $5,000 and $9,000. So what we are trying to do is to get back into our moorings, learn from the history of both the NHA and the HDC, and provide affordable homes. It is not a shell, but it is what I would call a basic house that gives the owner the flexibility, especially in these economic times, to take their time and finish the house the way that they see fit. So it's not a shell. I think we underestimate the resilience and the innovativeness of our people. give them that opportunity. You know, I remember in Pleasantville in 2003, we built a house for $90,000. It was literally a box. You pass in Ivy's Gardens, and you would be surprised to see what you are seeing. And these were postmen, delivery men, girls working in fast food outlets, drivers. So I would not knock it. History is on our side. Let's get back to our moorings and provide shelter for those people who the agency of late had forgotten.
Time alone will tell. Madam Chair, thank you so very much.
Dr. Bodo, thank you so much for your patience. I now invite you to join the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to do a follow-up, and perhaps I can go back to Mr. Campbell, I believe, with regards to the allocation formula that is used for the distribution of HT houses. And the 60%, the random distribution, can you provide some more clarification on that? And I ask this because I'm thinking if somebody has an application inside for 20 years and somebody has one inside for 10 months and both have similar criteria, you know, how does that create some sort of equity in the distribution process? Can you clarify, you know, how that works?
Sure, no problem. Thanks for the question, member. So for the allocation process to remain transparent, the random selection process is one of the best criteria to allow for this. Now, we understand the challenge with someone who would have applied 10 years ago, someone who would have applied yesterday. Both stand the chance of being allocated at home. But what really drives the allocation process after the persons get interviewed is if they qualify for the unit and where they applied for. So both persons, one would have been 10 years ago, one may have been yesterday, both would have gotten randomly selected. We would assess both of them, but one may not qualify for a unit or the other one may not want the unit where we have it available. So that's how it basically drills down in a funnel approach to how we allocate the best tenants and the best customers. But it is a very fair process with the random selection that keeps us in check.
No, I understand. Thank you. I understand what you're saying, but suppose the person who was applied, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just doesn't get included at all at some point in the draw, or is that guaranteed to happen? Is there a formula then that you use? When you say random, I'm just trying to understand.
So the random selection process is managed by the ministry. So there are certain criteria. So for example, the last random draw was done in 2020, where the customers would have been either randomly selected for a particular area. So you could be randomly selected for San Fernando, for example, but then you could also be randomly selected for San Fernando who would have applied for apartments. So it all depends on what the customer would have applied for and what the criteria for the random selection is. So there's various ways to do the random selection, but there's certain criteria that are managed by the ministry that would guide the assessment process.
So you're saying, just to be clear, that you're not randomly selecting from the pool that you have in front of you.
Yes, we are.
Or are you randomly selecting areas? I'm still clear. Right.
So the random selection is based on who applied. So there's 195,804 customers currently in the database. What normally would happen is that we would randomly select based on different criteria that are guided by us, that are guided to us, sorry. So if there's units in San Fernando, persons would be randomly selected that would have applied for San Fernando. But it could also be drilled down further, persons who would have applied for apartments in San Fernando. So there's certain criteria that determine and dictate the random selection. So it comes from the 195, but then it could be segmented further.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So then it makes the process perhaps a bit fairer. Is that what you're saying?
It does.
All right. I'll take your word for that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
And I'd like to add another level. The ministry's internal audit department supervises the random selections.
Okay, sorry, Madam Chair. If I can just follow up. Well, in that case, then, MD, perhaps, do you have a process where you review applications or applicants who perhaps would not have met or been selected by the random process, but who would have passed a certain waiting time? Because as a member of parliament, I would have people come in and say, listen, they've applied 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. So is there a process that will pick these people up and give them a better or fairer chance, so to speak, to get selected?
No, there is no process that reviews persons by the date of application or based on age. It's based on qualifying and for the area they would have selected. It's random. It's a random process.
All right, I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you have no further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other member of the committee has any further questions? Okay, so there are some questions that we are going to send in writing. And I just want to thank the managing director, the chairman, and the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and all the staff and the members of the board of the HDC for this very, interesting discussion. I have one last question, and maybe that's to the chairman, to ask how do you see this restructured, or these three new entities and the new HDC fulfilling sustainable development goal, which speaks about providing safe cities, inclusive developments, resilient communities, sustainable communities?
Madam Chairperson, I will start by saying I'm excited at the prospect. I believe that the restructuring, reorganizing of HDC would produce what we anticipate, and that is, as you say, providing safe, sustainable communities. We are hoping in the very near future to start moving our housing developments into the green zone. That is where they are sustainable in terms of water use, in terms of garbage disposal, in terms of energy, utilizing either solar or wind, so that this restructuring reorganizing gives the agency chance, in my view, to fulfill its mandate and to provide the opportunity to access affordable homes and to live in sustainable communities.
Okay, so I thank you very much. I think I may have omitted to call on member Maurice Julian. Is she still there? Okay. You have a question?
Madam Chair, I'll accept it. However, I'd really like to find out about the flood plans in Oropoon and I think Springvale. Real Springvale, Saint, Oropoon Gardens. I would just really like to know about the flooding plans and what is happening. I remember the Oropoon was something as simple as the person who was supposed to turn on the pump did not turn on the pump, so I would be very much interested, and I'm sure the committee would be in finding out what are the flooding issues and what has been done to mitigate said issues. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the chairman's hand is up.
Yes, it's a really timely question, because yesterday, Minister Sinanan invited the Minister in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the Managing Director, myself, Deborah Cheeseman, and Mr. Vadale to attend a meeting at the Ministry of Works, where the ministry revealed its plans for dealing with the flooding issues. And one of the things that the minister was at pains to point out, and with his young, bright, technical crew, I was really impressed, was that there was no easy solution to the flooding. we're experiencing climate control and climate change. We're experiencing adverse weather. We are getting rainfall in a day that would normally be a month of rainfall. But his young technical staff outlined a plan with the aid of the Andean Development Bank, who's funding the implementation of the studies and of the plan. And the first item on the agenda here showed us I think Senator Dialson was also at that meeting representing Louis Springs, Valsane, South homeowners. The first item that they're going to tackle is to alleviate the flooding in South Valsane through the building of a berm, sluice gates, and some pumps. The ministers are pains to point out that the Caribbean River starts in Tamina, and what we have to do is a holistic approach. So we are going to bring relief, we hope, by the next rainy season to the residents of South Valsane and the HDC development Real Springs. At Oropoon, we were fortunate in this flooding that we did not get serious flooding. The pumps work and the gates also work. We are working closely with the MP for the area, and I must say the managing director has a working relationship with Kadisha Amen. So we are working together with the MP for the area to solve the Oropoon issue. Greenvale, we believe, knock on wood, that we have solved that problem. In all of the episodes of flooding, we did not have any incidents of flooding. So that the HDC has committed to work closely with the Ministry of Works. In fact, the minister was kind enough to lend us his technical people to come and explain to the various communities what the solutions are and what are the plans, so that there are plans, relief is coming, but it is not a quick fix. So thank you for that timely question, MP Julia.
Thank you very much. And just one last call to members. Any other questions? All right, so as I say, there are some other questions that we will send to the managing director for written responses, particularly like dealing with the your plans to have stymied the defective units and so on, and how those plans have been working. And some of the issues that were raised that we've asked you to respond in writing. We'd send you some written communication requesting that and the timelines. Okay, so again, I want to thank you all for a very fruitful discussion. I want to thank the members also of the committee for their participation. I wish you all a very good evening and a safe journey home. Thank you very much. This meeting is now suspended.
Thank you, Chair and members.
Thank you, Chair.